I really am grateful to be here because this community has served my life, my family's life in so many different ways, from babysitters that really aren't in the babysitting arena, equity investors in my ventures, and general support in times of health recovery. So I'm going to try to cram in a bunch of information in this 20 minutes, and most of this kind of goes over a 12-month assignment if you were to engage in some coaching. So at any time, if this resonates with you and you want to dive a little bit deeper, ping me. We'll do breakfast, lunch, or happy hour, and we can see what God's doing in your life. So the topic today is this concept of thinking differently like an elite C-level corporate athlete. And the two goals are going to be to try to identify how our tripping hazard thoughts keep us from elevating to the next level, and then some productive thoughts that can hopefully go with you on your daily journey and help elevate you to the next level. So, as PJ mentioned, I'm a principal partner at Associates Professional Coaching, also known as APC, and my 6 colleagues and I pretty much put everybody in 3 buckets of assignments. And the first is the senior executive. This is a guy or gal that finds themselves as a subject matter expert in the industry, but isn't really getting the effectiveness that they're looking with their team. Maybe they've got some blind spots, but regardless, they found themselves isolated. They need a confidential thinking partner. The second, and my most favorite, is the rising star, because they'll take the mask off because they're looking to be coached up, take the baton from that senior exec, and take everybody to the next level. But they need a little coaching up, a little development. And my third, we'll call the sandbox leader. This is the fella that just doesn't play well with others. I love this moment where everybody does a little, that guy, or maybe you're talking about yourself. If you do fall in that category or know somebody, let me know. I'll outsource that to another firm. All 3 have this one superpower in common. And it's not a mind blower, but it's our thinking rituals. And as corporate athletes, we're not sitting in the batter's box swinging 1,000 times a day or throwing or whatever. It really is our brain and our subject matter experts. It's simple, but there's nothing easy about it. So for instance, put yourself think back in a situation most recently where you were 4th and goal or down to the wire. We're talking 4 o'clock on Friday, you got to get something done. You were already wanting to be out of the office. Monday morning, you're already late to work. The inbox of Avalanche is waiting for you to be buried out of. Okay, we got that scenario in our head? Okay. So now, what was your strategy? What was your tactic to achieve the goal? Well, you're probably like most of us, we're like, I don't know. Right? I want to get the hell out of there. And if you talk to a professional athlete, they're never going to step up to the mound without their ritual, without their strategy, without their tactics. Oh, right? You ever step on the mound thinking, I just want to get the hell out of here? Maybe. So this idea of elite corporate athlete, it's nothing new. It's been upcycled many times with phrases like executive competencies, working genius, if you're a Lencioni fan, or superpowers. But Dr. Laher and Tony Schwartz, you can read it in Harvard Business Review, I think 2001, came up with this concept after 25 years studying professional athletes and their routines, and said, how can we transition this over to, the corporate C-level guys and gals? And they would say that's the ideal performance state, right? Not, I want to get the hell out of here. It's what is the ideal performance state where I'm going to make good decisions to lead my team. They've identified two variables that are necessary. And the first is balance, and the second are rituals. They're key. I put this sinking ship because most of you probably know me as a real estate guy. And one of my mentors, Bruce Cohen, Buddy Cohen's son, and for you real estate guys, you probably got a loan from him at one time. He would say, real estate's like a sinking ship. If it's not industrial, it's multifamily. If it's not retail, it's hotel. And what people do is we go to one side of the ship, that starts sinking, and then we go to the other. So in our industry, we're very comfortable with this imbalance, and we're always positioning how do we stay level on our pursuit. And what we do is we will default to get the hell out of that industry or that office or our house to get to the office, and we lose the strategy. We just do. And we stop thinking strategically. And then when that doesn't work, we run to the other side of the ship and we say, okay, well, let's design a new plan. And that goes a little too slow, and for whatever reason, we do this teeter-totter and we go in a cyclical pattern. And as corporate athletes, we wonder why we hit ceilings and we get frustrated. Well, we just kind of repeat this process. So Schwartz and Laher said it really comes down to four categories. Our capacity physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And for the professional athletes, the physical and the spiritual is easy to identify, right? And I'm going to get ready. But for the corporate athletes, our rituals are like, okay, we get in the office, we put our keys down, get some coffee, open the email. But that's really not part of the game, right? That's not changing how we're leading others. So why this brain concept ritual I think is so important, and this is where I get a little geeked out here, is we have 100 billion neurons in our head. And keep in mind, these stats are a little old. Medicine's finding all these new imagery that is showing the multiplication, the evolution of our knowledge with our brain. So we can at least argue we've got 100 billion neurons that are ready to fire at any time. With that, we've got 100 trillion connections that can be made, which basically means we have 1 million more stars in our head than the Milky Way. So when we think about, right, this is kind of mind-blowing a little bit, it's infinite. The tool, the strategy of using our brain is infinite. And that's, I want to emphasize that because this concept of mindset, most say, well, you know, I've always done it this way. And I want to challenge you and say, why? You have, I think it's called a gazillion? I don't even, you know, my math guys, do 100 billion times 100 trillion. And that's how many options you have to do something different. Mind-blowing. So, not only do we have all those stars, but statistics have shown that top performers have 30 to 60,000 thoughts a day. 30 to 60,000 thoughts. And 80 to 90% of them are repetitive. So math guys, you know, what are we talking? Almost 50,000 thoughts a day that are repetitive? I mean, I can think of like 3 in my head. I wake up, lunch, and when do I get to go back to bed? Yeah. Statistics has shown, and I won't bore you with all of it, but I highly encourage you to subscribe to Harvard Business Review if you're not already on it. Great information, usually 1 to 2 pages of reads. And corporate athletes, their default strategy is go longer, harder, and faster. And I'll share a little story about that in a second. As the serious health risks, we all know them. I'm not even going to put them down there. We've heard the guys up here talking all the time, from stroke to heart attack to whatever. I'll share my unique experience. But I think most importantly is this concept that God is looking. You know, regardless of where you're at in your faith journey, God's consistent and he's watching. A verse that helps me remember that is this Psalm 139, 1 through 6. I'm a big fan of King David, mainly because he's made all the mistakes that we've heard and all the successes that we aspire to. And yet, he's known as a man after God's own heart. I hope somebody puts that on my tombstone. A man after God's own heart. And that man said, "You have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. All my ways. But before a word is even on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. You hem me behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Your knowledge is so wonderful, it's too lofty for me to attain, right? 1,000,000,000 times 1,000,000,000,000. Where can I go from your spirit? There's nowhere I can go." So keep those 5 things in mind as we explore this a little further. So now, why don't we, right? We can talk till we're blue in the face. Why don't we move from the longer, faster heart? If you fall into that category, it's probably because of a quantification bias. The math's too difficult. How do you measure effective leadership? How do you measure, mind-blowing thought changes? Really challenging, right? When we can go to the math, I can go on a seeking shift where, retail, stay away from retail right now. We're going industrial. I can do the pro forma and tell you why. Or, serious health risks. I'm an adrenaline junkie. This is what's worked. I gotta get out of the office. So just get out of my way. In fact, I've got a client right now. Actually, I didn't renew him. Global facility maintenance company. We're talking thousands of work orders a week across the globe. The guy is a brilliant subject matter expert on logistics and services. And when you ask him, what's the ceiling you're hitting? He'll say, I really don't understand why. I mean, people say I run them over, but we gotta get this shit done. That's the adrenaline bias. My favorite one, the fundamental attribution error, again, a Lencioni favorite. This guy didn't get it done because he's lazy. But me, no. I was under the gun. I had this environment that said I had to get it, and I'm not him. I'm better, and I'll blame it on the environment. Or the sophistication bias. It sounds great, but this is just too simple, right? That your solution is think differently? Well, that's too simple. Remember, 30 to 60,000 repetitive thoughts a day. So for me in 2020, I was guilty of all of these. I'll give you the Cliff Note version, because that could be a whole nother talk. December 31st, 2020, New Year's Eve. I'm at my ranch in rural Indiana because of the fundamental attribution error. I had an insurance claim that was expiring at 5 o'clock New Year's Eve, and my regional service manager was upset that he was considered essential. So he didn't want to go, right? Big character flaw. So the environment says, I got to go and do it. So I don't tell anybody. I get in my car. I'm going all the way there. Hadn't eaten all day. On my 3rd cup of coffee, got 3% battery left on my phone. Don't see where I'm going. Hit a divot. Go down some topography. And I shatter my leg. I shatter my fibula, the shin bone, 100% from my knee to my ankle. My fibula, the outside bone, 50% shattered from my knee down to my ankle. And the worst part is my heel was where my toe was supposed to be, and vice versa, it twisted 180 degrees. That happened because I saw I had 3% battery left, and I was going to do a voice recognition with my coffee because this is just too simple. I'm going to beat this insurance adjuster. I'm getting that money. And I'm doing a voice recognition to my wife so that she knew where I was, even though I know we don't have any cell reception. And it'll eventually go out. And I don't see where I'm walking. And after multiple in and out of consciousness, 6 hours later, my phone rings. And I'm dressed like this, it's 30 degrees, but sunny. And, I was sure I was going to be dead because I mean, I'm surrounded by farmers. Nobody knows I'm there. My wife calls, and I said, I broke my leg, this is where I'm at. I run out of air. I don't know if you heard me. I pass out again. A couple hours later, first responders find me. We happen to be in a hot spot. Remember COVID, right? We kind of in March. We're now New Year's Eve. Rural Indiana, COVID was not a problem for them. So they take me to the local hospital. There's no rooms, no surgeon, and no medicine for what I need. And my leg, which is like this, needs to be reset like that. So they reset it, I pass out again, I come to, I don't get my vision yet, and they're wheeling me out, and their ER doctor says, just make sure you keep your leg elevated or they're gonna cut it off. And with that, the doors closed. I'm in the parking lot, sitting in a wheelchair with my leg about this big, and I'm like, what has happened? How did this happen? Another 6 hours later, so we're 12 hours into the situation, I get proper medical help here in Chicago. And the doctors say, wow, you're alive. That's amazing. You have compartment syndrome, which is a scenario where the internal bleeding suffocates the limbs so that, it protect the body. We're probably going to have to cut it off because you have no feeling in your foot and no pulse in your leg. But we're going to do what we can. So 5 surgeries later, 2.5-year recovery. I can walk again. It's a hard story to tell. But through it, I learned a lot of languages from God and would love to share those with you one-on-one. So now, that's the hard stuff. Now the fun stuff. What do we do about it? I was focused so much on the event and the outcome. And we can bring everything down to event plus response equals outcome. And the hope spectrum, I would say, take with you on a daily basis to constantly tweak how you're thinking. Your 100 gazillion trillion whatever opportunities to think differently. Put it in the hope spectrum. And that can be, on one end, despair, the other end, presumption. Presumption is, you got it all figured out, right? The math is too simple. I'm an adrenaline junkie. Or, you know what, I'm the subject matter expert. Get out of the way. Kind of like a Mr. White, if you're a Breaking Bad fan. The despair, Jesse, we know, God, how am I getting out of this? And I'll tell you, when you're sitting in God's country with no one else around, waiting to die, that despair is something. And there is hope. It's in the center. So the event focuses on the past, the outcome focuses on the future, and you have no control over either. But the response is in the presence. And this response, you can tap into those 100 billion, 100 trillion options. So when we think, well, how do we get to center? I would challenge you to do an aspirational discovery audit. Aspiration is basically the legacy that we want to leave behind after we're long and gone. The impact it will make eternally on the lives today. Think of King David, a man after his own heart. Here we are, still talking about it. Create a T-chart. One side put representative, the other side virtue. And the representative is identify somebody that you want to be like. For me, this is my Avenger list. Jesus, Vince, Chuck, Hunter, Claire. I sat down and I thought, who do I want to be like? And those were the people that came to my mind. Then I said, well, what do I like so much about them? And those are the virtues. I love that Jesus was a humanitarian, right? He's the reason why I, as someone of Jewish descent and half my life Catholic, the other half Protestant, I struggle with what's going on in the Gaza Strip. It's easy for me to have a fixed mindset and say, well, that. But when I aspire to be like Jesus, I'm like, wow, the humanitarian result here, how do we navigate that? I don't have the answers, but it taps into the 100 trillion. Vince, he's got patience. And for me, I was not patient with my employee and his belief that he wasn't essential. I wanted to get that shit done. Wisdom, you need more of it. I know I do. Courage. Hunter is the most courageous person I know. And my wife, Claire, temperance. Boy, if I would have just had temperance, I wouldn't have to have dealt with any of those vices. So I really challenge you to take some time, stare at the wall, and say, who do I want to be like? Because those are the people that you want to put on your whiteboard. In fact, I have this on my whiteboard. I have it on my daily alert. I have it on my afternoon alert. And I have it before I go to bed alert. Because I know my greatest way to elevate myself to the next level is through my brain. And if I can think like a wise, courageous, tempered humanitarian with patience 50,000 times a day, I'm going to be super effective. Now, the times that we don't, we trip, we get dirty, we're all bloody. Here's a fun little way to recover. Soap. Lather up. And soap stands for strengths. Remember, when we're on the despair end of the spectrum, we have no value. And we just think about, no good. I mean, I'm telling you, I was laying there thinking, how the hell did I do this? Why? Rather than, what can I do? I'm a superhero. Look at what I've done in my life. 30 years of experience. I've got a black belt in 2 disciplines. I didn't think about my strengths. Start with your strengths. Ownership. The number one symptom of anger is blame. And we do it very creatively, right? My employee's character is flawed. The environment put me in this situation. Now I got to get us out of it. Take ownership, because that's where you're going to find the most power. The power defines the ability to control your environment. Awareness. You have a handout there with Marshall Goldsmith's 20 bad habits. I like to call them tripping hazards. Now you know why, right? Identify your 3 top tripping hazards and be aware. Think of it 50,000 times a day, because your brain already is. And you will trip. And if we want to do it different, we need to start putting a plan together. So when it's 4th and goal down to the wire Friday afternoon, and you just got to get the hell out of there, pause. What's your strength? Who are you blaming? What are you going to trip over? And now what's your plan to do something about it? And that little sentence I said took a couple seconds. And when it doesn't work, rinse and repeat. Soap up, rinse and repeat. So, that's a lot of content. This takes a ton of time. And if it all just went over your head and was too cerebral, I leave you with this simple idea. Will this action reduce my regret and increase my joy? It's that simple. Pause, ask yourself, would this reduce my regret or increase my joy? And when we pursue joy, that is equivalent to us moving center and finding the hope that our Creator has already knitted in those hundreds of trillions of oxygen.